Let me ask you something. Have you ever caught yourself replaying a mistake over and over in your head? Kind of like a bad movie that you can't seem to turn off. Maybe you find yourself saying things like, I should have known better, or why can't I just get this right? If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Today, we're diving into something we all experience but rarely talk about. How we treat ourselves when we make mistakes, and the messages that we send to our inner child in those moments of frustration. For years, I was my own worst critic. Every mistake felt like proof that I wasn't good enough or capable enough. But what I've come to realize is that self-compassion, not self-criticism, is what truly allows us to grow. We'll talk about why it's so hard to let go of self-judgment, what our inner child really needs to hear, and some practical tools to help shift our mindset. But first, hi. Welcome to the Wolverine Lifestyle Podcast, where personal growth meets deep thought and introspection. I am your host, Dillon, and in this episode, we are exploring my personal discoveries through the journal prompt, Exploring Self-Compassion. How do you treat yourself when you make a mistake? What would your inner child need to hear in that moment? To understand why self-compassion is so important, we first have to unpack why mistakes feel so heavy in the first place. For me, making a mistake used to feel like failing as a person. If I couldn't figure something out on my own, I'd immediately assume I was stupid or weak. Looking back, I realize how isolating those thoughts were. I truly believed I was the only one struggling with these beliefs, and no one else could possibly understand what I was going through. But the reality is, most of us are a lot harder on ourselves than we are on anybody else. This is being learned through the evidence I discovered on my own personal development journey and with working with hundreds of clients that also dealt with this belief. We always seem to be our own worst bully in almost every regard. A big part of that comes from comparison. Think about it. How often do you look at others, whether it's peers, coworkers, hell, even strangers on social media, and assume that they've got it all figured out? It creates this illusion that we're the only ones who make mistakes, when in fact, making mistakes is a universal experience. If you're listening right now and nodding along, take a moment to reflect. How do you usually treat yourself when you mess up? Is your inner voice kind and understanding, or does it jump straight to criticism? This harsh inner voice often stems from deeper beliefs that we've carried since childhood. For a long time, I thought inner child healing was only about repairing the gaps in the relationships that we have with our parents. And while that's true for some, not all, but for some, it didn't fully resonate with me. My parents, though not perfect, they did their best to create a safe space for me to make mistakes and learn from them. The pressure I put on myself didn't come from them. It came from outside influences, things like comparing myself to peers, measuring my worth against the media portrayals of success, and internalizing societal messages about perfection. If you're new to the concept of inner child healing, here's what it's about. It's recognizing and addressing the messages we internalize as kids that still affect us today, or rather, any younger version of ourselves. That includes the teen years and the 20 years and the 30 years if you're in your 40s, etc., etc. Inner child healing reconnects us with our younger selves to heal past wounds, release emotional baggage, and live with peace and authenticity. Sometimes these messages come from parents, teachers, or even cultural norms. Other times, they come from any other experiences where we are triggered into feeling inadequate, unseen, or judged. For me, I had to confront the belief that mistakes made me unworthy. And that's where my inner child needed, oh, so much healing. Let's shift gears slightly here and talk about how societal expectations, especially around men and masculinity, play into this. As a man, I've felt the unspoken rule that mistakes aren't just a problem, they're a sign of weakness and incompetence. And it's what comes with this belief of incompetence that bugs the hell out of me most. This mindset, it created what I call analysis paralysis. Now, I didn't make this term up. I just like how it rolls off the tongue. And in this analysis paralysis, I'd overthink even the simplest decisions because I was afraid of choosing the wrong one. Picking a movie for a date became a 20-minute ordeal. Deciding what to eat on a free meal night, forget it. It just didn't happen. I would just default to whatever was familiar. What I've learned, though, is this fear of wrong choices seems rooted in the belief that our worth is tied to our performance. Even if choosing a movie or a meal has nothing to do with our performance, it's still the mental habit that we have around decision making. And here's the truth I've discovered through this exploration. There are no wrong choices. Every decision we make teaches us something, whether the outcome aligns with our goals or reveals a completely new direction. We either learn what we want more of, or we learn what we don't want more of. Both of these lessons hold an equal amount of value, which then just leaves us with the infamous FOMO, fear of missing out, as the biggest hurdle for us to jump. Which poses the ponder. Do we ever actually miss out on anything that simply was never meant for us? If you can relate to that, I challenge you to reframe your mindset to this. What if mistakes weren't failures at all, but opportunities to learn? In its simplest form, it's learning, hey, I want to do this again and I want more of this. Or, hey, I don't want to do this again and I don't want more of this. Now to explore the second part of this journal prompt. What does my inner child need to hear in those moments of indecision or self-criticism? I want you to sit with this thought for just a moment right now. Let this question marinate for a few minutes in the back of your mind. Even just the first part of that question. What does my inner child need to hear from me? Take your hand and put it over your heart. Ask yourself this question out loud. I'm not kidding. Do both. Hand on heart. And I want you to hear your own voice saying these words. What does my inner child need to hear from me right now? If you didn't feel anything, to really get a grasp for that question, think to yourself about that 5-year-old that just fell off your brand new bike. Let's go back to that time. You remember that bright sunny day? You found the tall hill at the park that was calling your adventurous little spirit. You thought to yourself, how fun it would be to race down it. Wind through your hair, sun warming your smiling face. Though you remembered your parents' loving advice to be careful, a surge of courage filled you as you pedaled hard to reach the top of the hill. Feeling so proud and exhilarated, as you raced down, you hit a rock. Within a blink, you tumble, scraping your knees up, doing your best to hold back the tears because you're a tough cookie. Yet, disappointment flooded over you as you were now worried about not listening to what your parents warned you about. Now, not only are you hurt, but you're worried that you're going to get in trouble too. What would you have needed to hear in that moment to comfort you? In those moments of vulnerability, we have to remember that these experiences are a part of our learning and growth. Mistakes don't define us. They are simply stepping stones on our journey. We can dust off our knees and embrace the lesson that courage means facing both triumphs and setbacks. We possess the strength to tackle any obstacles in our lives, just like that brave little rider. Let's carry this lesson with us. It's okay to learn and grow along the way. My answer to this question at the time of exploring this prompt What does my inner child need to hear in those moments of indecision or self-criticism? Was simple. My inner child needed to hear, you're safe. It's okay to make mistakes. There are no wrong decisions. When I remind myself of this, it's like flipping a switch. The pressure releases like a valve was just opened and my decisions magically feel lighter. One strategy I've found helpful is actually setting a time limit. If I'm stuck in a decision, I'll give myself 30 seconds to choose, to make a decision. Sometimes my girlfriend and I have made it into a game. We challenge each other into making a choice in under 2 minutes. What's fascinating is how this playful approach, it completely shifts the energy around the choice that has to be made. It reminds me and my inner child that life isn't about getting everything right. It's about the experience, experimenting, learning, and growing. I want to leave you with a few actionable steps you can take to cultivate self-compassion. The next time you make a mistake, stop and take a breath. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Speak kindly to yourself. Imagine what you'd say to a friend or a child in your situation. Then say those same words to yourself in the exact same way. Reframe your mistakes. Instead of seeing them as failures, view them as data points. They're simply information guiding you toward what works and what doesn't work for you. Make it a game. If indecision is a struggle, try turning it into a challenge with a time limit. You'd be surprised how freeing it can be not locked in analysis paralysis. Self-compassion is like a muscle, and like any muscle, it gets stronger with practice. As we wrap up, I want to remind you of this. You are more than your mistakes. The way you treat yourself in moments of struggle says so much about your capacity for growth and healing. Today, we've talked about the weight of mistakes, the role of your inner child healing, and practical ways to show up for yourself and have more kindness for yourself. But this journey isn't about perfection. It's about progress. One step at a time, one day at a time. As always, thank you for joining me on this episode of the Wolverine Lifestyle Podcast. If it resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts and continue this conversation. Reach out to me on social media, leave me a review, and share this episode with somebody who might need it. It's the best way to get this message out there. And if you're ready to take a step further into your own self-exploration journey, grab my free ebook, 30 Days to Know Yourself. The link will be in the show notes, along with all of the links to all of the rest of my socials and all of the goodies and resources down there. Until next time, remember, you're doing the best you can, and that's more than enough. Take care of yourself, and don't forget to be kind to your inner child.